Hello and welcome back to Dragon December here on the Arcane Forge. It's just like Shark Week, only with more fire, and it lasts for a whole month. My name is Josh, and today I wanted to talk about yellow dragons. They're some of the missing dragons that we have in Dungeons & Dragons, and today I'm going to be using some 80s articles that detail what these missing dragons might have been like, and I'm going to be putting my own spin on them. I'm going to be drawing them today, talking about my influences, and also talking about how these creatures might have behaved and how to use them in your games. Now, importantly, if you want to use yellow dragons in your game, I've made some homebrew stats up for you for all the wormlings, adults, young ones, and even the ancient yellow dragons as well. And all of those are absolutely free. They are in my description box. You can find a link to the homebrew part of my page, my website, where all of these things are detailed. So hopefully you've been following along with Dragon December so far, and you've seen the Monster Mondays that I've put out about chromatic dragons and metallic dragons. Maybe you saw last week's Orange Dragon video last Friday, where I did very much the same sort of thing with another missing dragon. So if you've not, make sure to check those out. But today is going to be very much the same format as last Friday. For those of you who have not seen that video, basically the premise here today is that I have a magazine from the 80s, a dragon magazine published in 1982 that details what a yellow dragon might have been like in first edition D&D. And then I've taken those stats, the information in that article, and translated it into a 5th edition monster for you to use. But also, I'm an illustrator, so I have decided to draw these creatures as well. And I'll be using a little bit of influence from the original drawings that you can see in the article there. Beautiful, beautiful artwork, so it'd be a shame to ignore, but I also want to have my own spin on things because what's the point in just copying something when you can have a bit more fun? So one really important thing to note about yellow dragons is that they are seafaring dragons. They dwell in coastal regions, and that's very, very visible in the original artwork. We can see it drinking water, but also it has these webbed fingers to help it with swimming. It has this enormous sail on its back, things like that. So I wanted to make sure that in my drawing I covered similar sort of things. So I took this initial back sail idea that this creature had, and I just went absolutely crazy with it. I gave them sails and flares and fins and all that kind of stuff absolutely everywhere, because how often do you get to draw a sea-based dragon? Not very often. And with it having sort of webbed fingers, I thought it might be a good idea if its wings were even more webbed than sort of traditional bat-like wings that dragons tend to have. So I end up connecting its wings, the skin that's pulled tight to make these kind of leathery wings, to its neck as well, in the hopes that all this connectedness would kind of make these creatures more agile in the water. And one thing I didn't mention last time in my Orange Dragon video, but I am going to make note of here, when I was creating the Orange Dragon last week, I mentioned that this was a fusion between a red and a yellow dragon. And I talked a lot about it having these long horns and things like that, but also these kind of fins and flares that you can see on the drawing of the yellow dragon that I'm doing here. One thing that both sets of drawings seem to have are these bizarre kind of horns or claws or talons on their elbows and on their joints in their legs as well. And it's not too peculiar to see a dragon having these kind of things in all sorts of artwork. I like the idea of them, if it's something that's going to be spending a lot of time on all fours, and it's going to have a group of adventurers surrounding it, then, giving it some jagged bone spikes and things like that on its elbows just makes sense for being able to strike people who are maybe behind it and things like that. From a narrative perspective, that just makes sense. But importantly, these kind of horns are curved downward in both of these original drawings, and to kind of pay homage to that idea, I made sure that both my yellow and my orange dragon have those. I wouldn't normally draw those going that way. I'd kind of have them curved the other way or going straight out, but it was a really distinctive thing, and I thought if I'm converting an 80s drawing into my style, I'd like to include that just to show reference to the original artwork. So interestingly, the orange dragon that I made last week had these kind of noodly whiskers on its cheeks, because that featured in the Orange Dragon illustration that was in this magazine. I thought that seemed like a really good idea, and it's not something that I would normally draw on a dragon in particular. I'll go for sort of like jagged tusks and horns and, spiky things, but not usually soft little noodly things. But I wanted to put that on my orange dragon last week because I thought it was an interesting feature that showed that this wasn't just a red dragon with some different coloration. It showed that it was a kind of river dragon, a kind of aquatic dragon. It kind of looked like, Chinese dragons sometimes have kind of moustaches and whiskers and things like that, and I thought it was a good idea. Now, interestingly, the yellow dragon in these illustrations doesn't actually feature that, but because it's not something that I would draw on my red dragons usually, and because orange dragons are a fusion of yellow and red, I wanted to give those little noodly bits to my yellow dragon, to kind of say that this is where the orange dragon got these things from, if that makes sense. But what does the article actually tell us about these creatures? Not a huge deal, but some, and it's some stuff to go on. We're told that according to colour wheel theory, the green dragon's parents many generations ago were blue and yellow dragons. The blue dragon is well documented. Despite being rare, it's abundant enough to have been seen by villagers and adventurers alike. Yellow dragons, however, are very rare, or perhaps non-existent, on the continent where most AD&D adventures take place. Few, if any, have ever been seen. Since no yellow dragon has been captured locally for study, the characteristics of yellow dragons have been deduced by sages asking if a green dragon is the product of blue and yellow, then what kind of dragon mated with a blue one could produce a green one? And it's this deductive reasoning that essentially I followed in order to create a yellow dragon as well in 5th edition. Further to that though, the article goes on to say that yellow dragons tend to lair in seashore cave complexes or narrow gorges, near high salinary pools in inland salt flats created by long dried oceans. They like to stay near beaches and things like that because their yellow coloration will blend in more easily to their surroundings, essentially. But salt is very important to them, and that is because their breath attack is a cone of salt, sodium chloride, which can produce chlorine gas to poison people, but also can rust things. And it's kind of the combination of those two things that I found really interesting to go ahead with. So essentially I took the idea that this creature dwells in sort of like beaches or on the coast, has a very, very strong affinity for water, very strong affinity for salt, and that its breath can rust things, and that it might like to camouflage itself near the sand and things like that. And essentially, I'll read to you what I came up with. You can absolutely read this yourself. As I say, this homebrew is totally free. You can just take a look at it by following the link in my description box to the homebrew part of my website. But what I came up with is as follows, based on that article, with quite a lot of embellishment. So I said that these dragons are so infrequently seen as to be thought extinct, but at one time they would have been one of the more potent chromatic dragons under Tiamat's banner. They are the missing primary dragon, next to red and blue, and are believed to be the progenitors of green dragons. Perhaps their numbers are so few after spawning such duplicitous and treacherous dragons as the green dragons, or perhaps they naturally evolved into greener hues over time and are mostly indistinguishable from modern green dragons. These rare pure-blood dragons lair in coastal, sandy regions or salt flats, where their striking colours blend in with the midday sun, where they can feast on whales and dolphins or other marine life and collect ever-corroding and rusting monuments to their own towering might, dredged up from the ocean depths. Now, with the idea of their breath attack rusting things, I really went down on that idea. So I said that yellow dragons breathe a blisteringly concentrated spray of salt, which rapidly rusts ferrous metals on contact and dissolves organic materials. From the corroded metallic remains of their victories in combat, or from those similarly rusting objects that have drowned beneath the waves, they build monuments to themselves. These jagged and razor-sharp structures are fused together with beautiful salt crystals as tall as trees, which not only appeal to the dragon's aesthetic tastes and self-aggrandizement, but also fix them in place, making them much more difficult for would-be thieves to steal. Now, importantly here, I wanted to give the yellow dragons an interesting lair, because I have an opportunity here to make a submarine kind of creature's habitat that can also fly. It can produce crystals, and also if its offspring are green dragons, then these things, we know green dragons produce these massive kind of webways, these mazes of roots and trees. They like to play with mortals. They're obsessed with torturing them and tricking them, making them fight amongst themselves, and I wanted to include some elements of that in the yellow dragon. We're told none of this in the article, but I just kind of made it up, and it seemed as awful as something that a dragon would come up with, so let me know what you think. I said that yellow dragons make their homes in shallow submarine tunnel systems where air pockets within these systems provide enough hydration and air to produce the most rust. Alternatively, they dig these holes themselves in salt flats until they find pockets of salt water deep beneath the earth. There they form immense crystal palaces from the salt that they can breathe, adorned with rusting metal ornaments and treasures long since forgotten to time beneath the ocean or buried deep beneath the earth. Their palaces attract followings of Sahuagin, Tritons, sea elves, and other curious creatures that call the sea their home. Once entrapped within, these creatures are driven mad by spiraling mazes and confusing traps set out by the dragon, whose breath forges new crystalline tunnels to become lost in, or blocks up previously explored rooms. Eventually, once they reach the core of a yellow dragon's lair, this beast will pit intruders against one another, leaving only one survivor, one deemed worthy, to serve the dragon. So you can see there's a lot of influence there from green dragons and their desire to sort of collect people, if that makes sense, and have them fight against each other. So interestingly, the strange part here is going to be their breath attack, which I had to make deal acid damage and rust things to be in keeping with this. And you know what? It actually turned out to be one of my favourite breath weapons. So reading from the Yellow Dragon Wormling, I've said that the dragon exhales sodium chloride in a 15-foot cone. This obviously gets better the larger the dragon gets. Each creature in that area must make a dexterity saving throw, taking 7d6 acid damage on a failed save or half as much on a successful one. Additionally, creatures who fail their save will notice that the breath attack rapidly rusts any non-magical ferrous items worn or carried by the affected creature. Weapons take a cumulative -1 penalty to damage rolls, and if its penalty drops to -1, the weapon is destroyed. Metal armor takes a permanent -1 to the AC it offers, and armor reduced in this way to 10, or a shield that drops to a +0 bonus, is destroyed. So pretty much verbatim what a rust monster does, but as a breath attack, and I thought that was really exciting. And again, just adding some more variety, something a little bit different for DMs to use against their players if they're getting tired of using the same sorts of dragons, although there are an absolute ton of dragons out there. So there's a lot of variety, but this is a really good creature for a sort of aquatic adventure, or if there are a lot of players in a lot of very heavy armor that a DM needs to contend with. If everyone has extremely high ACs, then you might want to throw something that is basically breathing rust monsters at them to kind of even the playing field. Importantly though, this drawing ended up being one of my absolute favourites of all time, just because I love the colour palette so much. I thought this was really, really wonderful. I often like to think that pink is my kind of secret weapon when it comes to drawing. And it just contrasted so well with the yellow scales of the dragon here. So I really enjoyed this drawing, and I enjoyed coming up with this homebrew. I hope you guys end up using it, and I hope you enjoyed the video as well. If you did, please make sure to leave a little thumbs up, a little like down below. Perhaps favourite this video and share this with the rest of your party if you feel that this kind of creature is something that your DM is going to throw at you, or if you are the DM, share it with your group and let them know what's coming ahead of time. See your players quake in their boots before a new type of dragon. Anything that you can do like that really, really helps this channel to grow. So thank you so much if you choose to do that. It's always good to let YouTube know that I'm doing a good job, because it really does tangibly help. So thank you so, so much. And this isn't even the end of Dragon December. We have yet more videos in the run up to Christmas. I hope you'll join me on Monday, where I'll be talking about shadow dragons next. And the following Monday, I'll be covering the mother of all chromatic dragons, Tiamat herself. So until Monday, I hope you have fantastic D&D adventures over the weekend. I hope you're having a wonderful holiday period. I hope you're having a great Dragon December. So good luck fighting rust-inducing dragons, and happy monster hunting.